They told you the Lions' 53-man roster was basically set in stone. They lied. Or maybe nobody lied. Maybe the NFL just did what the NFL always does, which is remind everybody that behind every star, there's a graveyard of guys fighting for their entire careers in the span of about 3 preseason weeks. Because right now, sitting between preseason Game 1 and Game 2, the Detroit Lions are staring down one of the strangest, most unpredictable roster crunches this franchise has seen in years. And before we get into who's making it and who's getting sent packing, let's get one thing out of the way. Detroit Scope is inching closer to 1,000 subscribers, and please, we could really use your help getting there. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now. It costs you nothing. It means everything to us, and it keeps this channel alive to keep bringing you the deepest Lions coverage on YouTube. Now let's talk roster chaos, because this year it's real. Everybody complains that the NFL's 53-man limit is too small, that teams should be allowed to carry more bodies, more depth, more insurance. But here's the truth nobody wants to admit. The league office knows exactly what it's doing. Keep the number at 53, and suddenly guys who were complete afterthoughts become matters of life and death for a franchise. One injury, one retirement out of nowhere, and a player you've never heard of is starting for your favorite team on a random Sunday in October. That's the reality Detroit is living through right now. And it starts at the position nobody expected drama from at all. Quarterback. For months, the plan felt locked in. Jared Goff at the helm, Teddy Bridgewater as the steady, experienced backup, and Hendon Hooker developing behind the scenes. Simple, boring, even. And then Bridgewater shocked everybody and retired, blowing the whole thing up. Within hours, not days, hours, Detroit scrambled and brought back a familiar face, journeyman quarterback Josh Dobbs, on a modest one-year deal. Dobbs isn't just some random arm off the street either. He's got history with new offensive coordinator Drew Petzing from their time together in Arizona back in 2023, and he actually spent a stint with the Lions before, back in 2022, mostly on the practice squad. It's a reunion nobody predicted, and it changes the entire quarterback room. Meanwhile, undrafted rookie Luke Altmyer, a Mississippi native who transferred from Ole Miss to Illinois, has been thrown into the fire, taking heavy representatives in the preseason opener at Cincinnati. So now the question becomes brutally simple. Does Detroit keep 3 quarterbacks, or trust that Dobbs and Altmyer battle it out for one clear backup role? And if Goff ever goes down, is it Dobbs, a guy who can extend plays with his legs and keep the offense moving, that gives Detroit the best shot to survive? It's not the quarterback story anyone expected heading into the summer, but here we are. Now let's slide over to the backfield, because this is where things get genuinely fascinating. Juh-MEER Gibbs is obviously the engine of this offense, a certified superstar who Detroit will protect at all costs. But everything behind him is a puzzle. Isaiah Pacheco, the former Super Bowl champion running back, is technically part of the mix, but let's be honest, that Super Bowl run feels like it happened in a different lifetime. He's coming off injury, and until he's actually out there taking live representatives, the shine on that name means less and less by the day. Then there's Sione Vaki, finally healthy again after battling back from his own setback, reportedly full go at practice, generating real buzz. If Vaki can stay on the field, Detroit's running back room behind Gibbs suddenly looks a whole lot more dangerous. And then there's the name that might surprise casual fans the most, Jacob Sailors, a pure special teams weapon who has flashed more burst and juice than almost anyone expected, even putting good tape on film against Cincinnati starters. Not many teams in this league can say they've got a 4th running back that dangerous. On top of all that, the return game battle is heating up too, with Malik Cunningham unexpectedly getting run as a returner and Travion Williams, a compact, bowling ball type back, brought in as fresh competition. Here's the silver lining if any of these depth pieces don't make the cut, though. They're not exactly the kind of players other teams are going to be racing to sign off Detroit practice squad. So if Vaki's recovery timeline slips even a little, don't be shocked if Cunningham or Williams sneaks onto the 53-man roster in his place. Then we get to the position where this entire roster battle truly comes alive. Wide receiver. This is where the mystery names start climbing the depth chart in ways nobody predicted a few months ago. The top of the room is locked in. Your stars, your primary options. But it's the back end of the roster that's turned into a genuine soap opera. One name keeps coming up again and again in a way that has fans doing a double take. Tay Martin. A guy who, a couple months ago, most Lions fans had never heard of, is now legitimately in the conversation to make the 53-man roster as a 6th wide receiver. Why? Special teams value, for one. and head coach Dan Campbell has reportedly been talking him up in a way that turns heads. Alongside veteran depth pieces who bring reliability and toughness, Martin's push is being fueled in part by uncertainty around a younger receiver who was supposed to take a leap this year, but has had a slower start adjusting to the increased attention and physicality of year two. Expectations got ahead of reality there, and now the door is cracked open for a name nobody was talking about at the start of camp. And here's the layer that makes this even juicier. Dan Campbell has a pattern of hyping up under-the-radar guys precisely because he wants them locked into key special teams roles. When your head coach starts dropping a depth receiver's name unprompted in press conferences, that's not an accident. That's a signal. The tight end room, by comparison, is refreshingly drama-free, mostly. There's real appreciation building for a promising undrafted rookie who's flashed enough juice to earn "I want him on this team" buzz, even if he's not likely to be some breakout superstar overnight. But here's the twist. If Detroit decides to carry 4 tight ends instead of 3, that could be the exact reason the 6th wide receiver spot dries up entirely, turning tight end depth into collateral damage in the receiver battle. Everything in this roster is connected. Pull one thread, and another position feels it. Offensive line, on the other hand, looks about as buttoned up as anything on this roster, for now. With franchise centerpiece protection locked in and the group getting healthier, most of the projected linemen look safe, especially with the expectation that a returning starter opens the year on injured reserve and misses the first month. But even here, chaos has crept in. Detroit has had a run of late-round offensive line draft picks over the years that simply didn't stick, a reminder that not every promising camp body survives the numbers game. And injuries have already started chipping away at what looked like a position of real depth heading into the summer. One day you're bragging about how deep your offensive line room is, and 2 camp injuries later you're suddenly thin and nervous. That's the NFL in a nutshell. Flipping to the defensive side of the ball, the interior defensive line looks almost overstuffed with talent. Alim McNeill and Tyleik Williams headline a genuinely exciting young duo, with more promising names flashing behind them in a way that makes fans wonder if Detroit is simply keeping too many bodies at one spot. It raises a real question. Are teams even counting defensive tackles and defensive ends as separate roster spots anymore, or is it all blending into one giant, versatile defensive line group? Because some of these guys are playing multiple techniques depending on the situation. On the edge, meanwhile, the numbers are much tighter, only 4 spots, seemingly locked in. But that hasn't stopped fans from mourning the names that got squeezed out along the way, including a couple of Brad Holmes draft picks from recent years who simply couldn't crack the roster despite being selected with real draft capital. It's a sobering reminder of just how unforgiving this business is. You can draft a player, invest resources in him, and still watch him get phased out within a couple of seasons because someone better showed up. Linebacker might be the single most talked about position group of the entire camp, and for good reason. Detroit brought in a former All-Pro, Super Bowl-winning veteran on a modest 1-year deal, and it has completely reshaped the room. It's the kind of signing that elevates everything around it, turning a solid situational player into a luxury depth piece instead of a necessity. And then there's the name every diehard fan wants to see stick. An undrafted rookie out of Morgan State who's turned heads in practice with pure physical tools and instincts, even if he's still raw around the edges. The hope is he can be stashed on the practice squad if he doesn't crack the initial 53. But here's the hard truth about the NFL that gets repeated every single year. The guys with tremendous upside who are fringe roster pieces almost never actually turn that upside into production. It happens so rarely that fans can practically count the exceptions on one hand. Most of the time, talented players who are ready to contribute do it immediately, and the ones who aren't ready simply never quite get there. That's just how this league works, whether we like it or not. Cornerback is where the storm clouds are gathering the thickest, and it all traces back to one specific draft class that is quickly becoming a cautionary tale. A former second-round pick from that class is now fighting just to stay relevant on the roster, and it's not an isolated case. That entire draft haul is looking shakier by the week. It's the kind of situation that reinforces why stacking draft picks matters so much for team building. Miss on 2 or 3 guys out of a 5-pick class, and suddenly your whole draft is a bust. Miss on 2 or 3 guys out of a 9-pick class, and you can still walk away with a genuinely productive group. It's also why some franchises, the ones willing to trade draft capital for proven veteran production, are looking smarter by the day. Sometimes paying for a known commodity beats gambling on unknowns, especially when your recent gambles haven't paid off. Safety, meanwhile, has quietly become one of the deepest, most encouraging rooms on the entire roster. One player is clearly still working his way back from an ACL injury that lingered longer than anyone hoped. But the good news is the top two safeties are both progressing on the physically unable to perform list and expected to return at full strength. When they do come back, don't expect the roster to bleed talent at safety. Expect it to bleed talent at cornerback instead, since that's the more crowded, more vulnerable room. And tucked into the fringe roster conversation is a name every fan should be rooting hard for. A kicker who was never even drafted, who's quietly become one of the most automatic weapons on this entire roster. A kicker with legitimate 70-yard range who deserves way more trust in fourth down situations than he's currently getting. If Detroit is smart, they lean into that leg more, not less, as the season rolls along. So where does that leave the Lions heading into the second half of the preseason? A roster with legitimate, encouraging depth across almost every position group, but a roster that is one bad week of health away from looking a whole lot thinner than anyone expected. Get healthy by week 1, and this team has every reason to believe life is going to be very, very good in Detroit this season. And that's exactly why we need your help growing this channel. Detroit Scope is closing in on that 1,000 subscriber milestone, and every single one of you hitting that subscribe button gets us one step closer. So smash that subscribe, drop a comment with who you think makes the final 53, and share this video with a fellow Lions fan who needs to see it. We'll see you on the next one.